Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Ewalt, and I serve the Texas Tribune as Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. Our panel is welcome to take a seat. Welcome to those joining us here in Longview for our conversation titled Running Out, Texas's Water Crisis and the Path Forward. Discussing the state's water crisis, the challenges here in East Texas, one of the few water-rich regions in the state, and the solutions that are proposed across the state. Our program tonight will run approximately 1 hour, with 45 minutes for moderated conversation and 15 minutes for your questions. To get to as many questions as possible, you can submit questions through our Q&A portal at texastribune.org. That's texastribune.org. You will also find a QR code on your program right here. We are grateful for the support of our sponsors. Our major sponsor is Methodist Healthcare Ministries. Please note that while sponsorship provides critical support for the Tribune, sponsors play no role in programming or the line of questioning for Tribune events. We also want to thank our host, Arts Longview, for hosting us for tonight's conversation at the Longview Community Center. A special shout out to Christina, Natasha, and Matt at Arts Longview for hosting us in this historic building. Just a little bit about Arts Longview, a nonprofit organization that manages the state-designated cultural arts district in Longview. Their mission is to spark a love of the arts, history, and culture in order to celebrate and enhance the creativity community here in East Texas. In their capacity, Arts Longview works to engage the community through a focus on the arts, such as the installation of murals, sculptures, and events like their quarterly arts walks. They support 8 arts and culture partner organizations, as well as a network of about 400 artists across the greater East Texas region. And since 2021, Arts Longview has been managing this venue. This is a historical building that opened in 1940 after being constructed by the Longview Women's Federation. Arts Longview has been renovating and revitalizing the building so that it continues to thrive as a premier performance venue in the cultural arts district. And you can learn more at artslongview.org. We also do want to thank Kelly Hall with the Longview Chamber for helping spread the word of tonight's important conversation. One, thank you to all those around the state who make the journalism of the Tribune, including events like this, possible by becoming Texas Tribune members. If you'd like to support the work of the Tribune, including work across the state on issues such as the water crisis facing Texas, visit texastribune.org/support. And one last bit of news here. A little more than a month from now, we will convene in downtown Austin for the Texas Tribune Festival. We invite you to step inside the conversations shaping the future of education, the economy, healthcare, energy, technology, culture, and the arts, with those driving decisions in Texas and across the nation. Our full program was just announced. You can learn more about more than 300 speakers we have joining us and more than 100 panels, and including, of course, on the topic we focus on this evening. You can learn more and purchase tickets at tribfest.org. If we believe they are joining us in the audience tonight, we also just want to acknowledge lawmakers who are here tonight, State Representative Cole Hefner and State Senator Brian Hughes. If you're here, thank you so much for being here this evening. And with that, and before we begin our program more formally,
there's 2 others. We have State Representative Jay Dean and State Representative Daniel Alders.
Wonderful. Thank you both for being here. Before we begin our program, I do want to welcome up to the stage my Tribune colleague and our East Texas reporter, Jess Huff. Jess joined the Tribune in 2023 and is based in Lufkin. I'll turn the program over to Jess.
Hi, y'all. My name is Jess Huff. I'm the East Texas reporter. I am a transplant who, over the last 8 years, has grown to love this region. It's where I met my husband, started and began raising my family. Your worries are my worries. What impacts you impacts me too. For the last year, I've sat in coffee shops, offices, and boardrooms with some of you while trying to dissect the region's response to our state's water crisis. Many of us have unwillingly obtained a master's degree worth of knowledge. Where does water come from? How much do we have? How do we know that? How much water is in 1,000 acre-feet, and why can't we just use gallons, for God's sake? To many, this year has been chock full of public meetings, long speeches, and legal battles over this most precious resource. And while I know that it is exhausting work, it also lends itself to a sense of hope. hope that people are paying attention and standing up for what they believe in. Regardless of which side of the aisle you sit on, that investment is invaluable. I hope we have presented your side accurately and with care. It is part of the reason my job exists, to be here in this region, listening to your thoughts, ideas, and concerns, to make sure they are included in statewide conversations. That's part of why the Texas Tribune is hosting this event here in Longview. This panel consists of experts who we, as reporters, have turned to when we need a clear understanding of what these stories tell us. We again turn to them tonight to expand upon that conversation. I pray that you will engage with them, ask your questions, expand your understanding, and share your knowledge. Texas can't resolve this issue without a clear understanding of how each possible path will affect her residents. Your time is valuable. Thank you for spending it with us. Now, let's get to tonight's conversation by meeting our panel. Jeremy Mauser directs Texas 2036 work in the area of infrastructure and natural resources, which includes water, oil and gas, and energy. Since joining Texas 2036 in September 2021, he has played a leading role in the Energy Expansion Project, charting Texas' energy future. A core part of that work is also directing research and policy development in water. Janice Bezanson, the Senior Policy Director for the Texas Conservation Alliance, has 40 years' experience protecting rivers, forests, prairies, and other rich wildlife habitats. Much of Bezanson's work has focused on Texas water policy. She has been a leading voice for safeguarding free-flowing rivers, organizing broad-based campaigns opposing unnecessary dam construction, and advancing water management strategies that emphasize conservation, efficiency, and reuse. She also has provided extensive input to the state water planning process, advocating that ecological and private property values to be included in Texas' approach to meeting future water needs. Kelly Holcomb was appointed General Manager for the Angelina and Neches River Authority in November of 2008, where he has been employed for 34 years. During his tenure with the authority, Holcomb has served in varying capacities from water and wastewater operator to planning and operations division manager to general manager. With over 40 years' experience, he has devoted himself to the water industry by providing assistance to numerous water and wastewater entities throughout the East Texas region. Moderating our conversation tonight is Alejandra Martinez. She joins the Tribune in the fall of 2022 as the Dallas-based environmental reporter. She was previously an accountability reporter at KERA, where she began reporting as a Report for America Corps member, and then covered Dallas City Hall. Before that, she worked as an associate producer at WLRN, South Florida's public radio station. I thank our audience and our panelists for joining us today. And with that, I turn the program over to Alejandra.
Thank you so much, Jess, for such a warm welcome, and thank you for everyone who made it here today. Special shout out to that Kilgore history teacher who brought a bunch of his students today, which is awesome to see young people here. Thank you. Okay, well, I'm very excited to talk about all things water. I guess to start, I'm going to turn to you, Jeremy. Could you please help us set the stage for why was water such a big issue or, point this legislative session, and what got us to this point?
Of course. So for the history students, we just had a historic legislative session when it comes to water policy. And the reason why was that over the past few years, there have been a bunch of high-profile stories about Texas water infrastructure needs. Everyone knows that we're a growing state, but when we look at the data, this growth, this population growth and economic growth, combined with declining water supplies, combined also with the threat of perpetual drought, which is part of the Texas experience, means that we need to expand our water supply portfolio. And if we don't do that, there could be some severe economic consequences, like we saw in the Rio Grande Valley, where a major employer went out of business because it didn't have enough water.
The sugarcane mill?
The sugarcane mill, that's right. So there's the economic development issue that's associated with reliable water supplies, but then there's the other issue of the problem of aging, deteriorating drinking water and wastewater systems. Certainly a lot of those are here in East Texas. The Tribune has done some wonderful reporting on what's happened with the city of Zavala, where business and civic activity has ground to a halt because that drinking water system has failed. And so the legislature has seen these stories over and over again about how our water infrastructure needs to be expanded and refurbished in order to meet the growth imperatives of tomorrow. And so earlier this year, Governor Abbott called on the Texas legislature to make a Texas-sized investment in water infrastructure, and the legislature delivered. It approved the largest water infrastructure funding package in recorded history, even going back to the 1950s. Now, the fight's not over. I think we'll talk about this more later, Alejandra, where we get to talk about what Proposition 4 means for funding for water infrastructure. But the legislature and the governor this year really connected the dots on what reliable water infrastructure means for business and community vitality for the future of Texas.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about the different threats to our water supply: population growth, drought, industry growth, climate stressors that are altering precipitation patterns. When you spoke about kind of both the new water supply and the water infrastructure as two key issues that lawmakers address, can you talk a little bit more about how those separate buckets took center stage in this legislative session and kind of how that led us to Proposition 4?
Yeah, so there's essentially two buckets, if you will, when it comes to looking at our water infrastructure. The first is the problem of aging, deteriorating systems. They leak, they cause boil water notices, they're health-based violations, they're sanitary violations, and there are a lot of systems in Texas that suffer problems due to their aging, deteriorating drinking water and wastewater systems. So I think that's really the first bucket that they're looking at. And the legislature, I mean, this was certainly one of the things that the legislature took into consideration when it considered this package of bills this year. The other issue has to do with water supplies, and that is a very big topic in Texas. Traditionally, water supplies just meant reservoirs and groundwater wells, and that's what we have used to develop and deliver water for a growing state. But we're kind of at the end of the road with relying on reservoirs and water wells alone. And so there's other things that need to be taken in consideration when we look about expanding and diversifying our water supply portfolio. And I think that's what the legislature is interested in here, where they want to see, like, how can we expand our water supply portfolio, which includes water conservation, water reuse, fixing aging systems, desalination of seawater and groundwater, potentially some reservoirs, but also fixing systems. So you eliminate those leaks that are wasting enough water every year to fill a major reservoir in Texas. And so I think that's what they were looking at this year when it came to what to do with our water infrastructure.
When you were talking about infrastructure, I saw, Kelly, you were like nodding because I know we've talked before, and I've learned through my reporting is that water, there's this term that's like they use everywhere, quote, water crisis for my region, and that looks different everywhere. Different regions have different types of water crisis, and something we've talked about, Kelly, is that, here in East Texas, new water supply is not really the issue, but more aging, old infrastructure. And I kind of wanted to turn to you to kind of elaborate on the challenges that are being faced in this region.
Thank you. Good evening, East Texas. For those of you who don't know, we live in a green part of the state. Texas is broken up to a brown 2/3 and a green 1/3 over here in East Texas. So you're exactly correct. We don't have a water supply problem per se. As a matter of fact, we flow more water into the Gulf of Mexico than probably, a large chunk of the water that hits the rivers and streams goes into the Gulf of Mexico. So there's a lot of water that's being missed, if you will. There's a missed opportunity there. That's not what I really want to talk about today. I'm going to leave that to some of the other members. I want to talk about infrastructure, and Jeremy did piggyback off what you said. The city of Zavala, you've been paying attention to the city of Zavala, the Tribune has as well. It's a large issue. It's a town of about 600 people. It's just over 300 water connections, retail water connections. They have had problems for decades. This is not a problem that just began in the last 5 or 10 years. This has been decades in the making. Anybody have a guess as to how much it's going to take to fix that one problem? $30+ million.
For
Just,
Zavala.
just for Zavala, just for the water. That doesn't deal with the wastewater issues that are going to come along with it. It doesn't deal with all of the other infrastructure problems that they have as a city. And where are they going to get the money? Who's going to pay for that piece of work? And it'll take a decade to build it. If the Water Development Board gave us the money today, it would take us a decade to finish that project.
Kelly, but how did we get there? How did it get to a point where, this infrastructure just wasn't maintained?
I hate to say this, but I've seen it over and over and over again. Let me give you a little bit of background, if you don't mind, Alondra. Our jurisdiction is all a part of 17 counties, roughly 8,500 square miles in the Neches River Basin. We have in our jurisdiction about 526 or so retail public water suppliers in our jurisdiction. We're estimating that 80 to 90 of those water systems, retail water systems, are in some point of failure. They're at risk of failure or have already failed. In the last 10 or 15 years, we've taken over 5 water systems, retail public water systems, small rural systems. We have consolidated 6 failed wastewater systems into one regional wastewater facility to the tune of, for those alone, we got water from money from Texas Water Development Board for 2 of those. One of them is a 230 connection system, $7.7 million, and we're basically building them a brand new water system.
So Kelly, you said like 20% of the systems are failing or about to fail. That's astonishing statistic.
Yes.
A couple other numbers to throw out there is that, if you look at the data from the Environmental Policy Innovation Center, 76% of public water systems in East Texas have had 1 or more boil water notices over the past 5 years. And this is a higher rate of boil water notices compared to the rest of the state. And there's a higher proportion of unsafe drinking water notifications in East Texas compared to the rest of the state. And I just want to share those 2 data points to say, the data is suggesting you're definitely right.
Just looking at the systems we've taken over, we issue boil water notices on a routine basis to the point we've got people dedicated to do just that.
Just boil water.
Just boil water notice. Now, I have some other duties as well, but we have a boil water notice on the system. That person right there is the one submitting all the paperwork to the TCEQ through our social media pages, as well as rescinding boil water notices as well. And it's much more than just an inconvenience not to have water. These old systems, for example, we took over one in 2022. It was an administrative process through the Public Utilities Commission. It took us 22 months to get it through the process. As a result of that, we got a grant from the Texas Water Development Board to basically rebuild the system. In the first 3 years alone, we fixed 112 water leaks in 36 months. 230 connections, 112. Every one of those required a boil water notice. Every one of those was an extended outage, not just out for a couple of the vast majority were out for more than 24 hours as a result of that because of the infrastructure failures.
And boil water notices should not be normal.
No, but it is the norm in East Texas. I don't know about the other parts of the state. I've seen some of the data, but in our part of the world, it is definitely the norm.
Yeah, I'm curious. Raise of hands, who has experience of boiled water notice here in East Texas? That is a lot of hands.
2/3 of the audience.
Yeah, more than half the room for those who are listening or viewing this in the live stream. And so I guess going back, big legislative year, water took center stage. There is this infusion of money that's coming in, Proposition 4, which is a constitutional amendment that will be in the November ballot. Part of that, as Jeremy said, is, there will be money coming for, hopefully, addressing these water infrastructure issues. How, I guess, are you prepping for that, Kelly? And then there's the other question, is what is coming through enough?
I could use the first $500 million myself just in East Texas alone. That's our initial estimate, is $500 million just to deal with the infrastructure side, not water supply for East Texas, for the Neches River Basin.
So how do you tackle such a big problem?
We lean on our legislators. We educate them as best we can. They've got to drink from a fire hose every session when guys like us show up, the 3 of us show up and start talking about water issues. The problem is, if you gave me $500 million today, it'd take me 25 years to fix it all. And what happens to most of us, I'll be retired by then, thank God, but most of us won't live to see the full implementation of those solutions.
And the thing is, too, is like this, according to our data, the state needs to invest at least $154 billion over the next 50 years on our water infrastructure alone. This is expanding water supplies, fixing aging systems. That doesn't even take into account what we need to invest for our flood control and flood protection infrastructure. That's another $54 billion, according to Water Development Board data. And so what the legislature did this year is they approved this funding package. They appropriated over $2.5 billion, and Proposition 4 represents up to $20 billion that can be allocated to our long-term water infrastructure needs. It's a noble start, and I think the legislature deserves commendation for setting up this dedicated funding stream, like what we do for roads. Will it cover $154 billion over the next 15 years? Probably not. But it's going to make a mighty dent in what's been a growing
A
problem.
very significant start, no doubt about it.
So we talked a lot so far about water infrastructure, and now I kind of want to turn to that second half of this piece, which is new water supply. And you kind of talked about how, it used to be, reservoirs and, drilling for groundwater and et cetera, but there's a shift for looking at more or different types of solutions. I guess I'll start with you, Jeremy, if you can kind of set the stage of like, what are the other solutions that are being looked at? And then I'm curious to go to you, Janice, because when Jeremy was giving earlier remarks, I know that you were also nodding and like trying. It looked like you wanted to say something as well, so yeah.
So when we talk about the water supplies, again, this is like a very broad portfolio. I mean, when we talk about water supplies in Austin, yeah, it's reservoirs are one of those things that's considered, so are groundwater wells. I think this legislature sees tremendous opportunity in how technology and innovation can also deliver more in the way of water supplies. And what we're talking about here is water conservation, water reuse, desalination of seawater and brackish water. They're also interested in looking at how produced water, which is a byproduct from oil and gas exploration, can be cleaned and recycled and reused for other beneficial purposes. And so when you hear them talk about water supply, it's really this big basket of ideas and projects that can work to extend the life of our existing water molecules or ultimately deliver new molecules to the state that are available for beneficial use in Texas.
Yeah, Janice, I want to turn to you because new water is something that, specifically reservoirs, that you have been looking into and fighting against in some situations also. Could you talk about how new water supply projects are impacting the East Texas region in particular?
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely wonderful that the legislature is focusing on this diversification that Jeremy's talking about, but those things are new and coming, and they haven't replaced reservoirs. New reservoirs are being proposed. The Region C water plan, the state's divided into 16 regional planning areas, and Region C is the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the huge metroplex, a few counties around it. That one water plan, the Region C regional plan, is proposing in East Texas to build Marvin Nichols Reservoir, to expand Wright-Patman, to take water out of Lake of the Pines, to take water out of Lake Palestine, to take additional water out of the Neches River in addition to what they're taking out of Lake Palestine, to work with Kelly to build Lake Columbia, and also there's a proposal for 50 water wells in East Texas, groundwater wells, where the water would also be sent to the DFW region. And this is an enormous impact on East Texas. We're talking 850,000 acre-feet of water, new water, in addition to what they're already getting out of East Texas, that's being proposed to move to the DFW area. And it's not you know, there's a lot of water here, and people say, well, but you've got plenty of water, we can take some of it. But in order to do that, they're proposing to build reservoirs, and that takes people's land. And water belongs to the state of Texas, but land does not. Land belongs to private property owners, and they have absolutely no choice about whether they sell their land. If a reservoir is approved, if they don't sell their land will be condemned, their homes will be condemned. And this is creating a huge controversy and a huge rift between the demands of urban areas and the fact that all the resources from urban areas are coming from rural areas who have no choice in the matter. We're talking about, you know, 66,000 acres for Marvin Nichols, one reservoir alone. And by the time the mitigation on this is done, probably 200,000 acres taken out of production. What this will do to the timber industry and the agriculture in Northeast Texas is, you know, devastating. But the studies that get done are done by people who have an interest in building the reservoir, by consultants to Region C who say, oh, it won't be that bad. But when you talk to people in the timber industry and the agricultural industry and the community leaders in East Texas, you hear that it will be that bad economically. And of course, the social disruption of forcing people off their lands and breaking up communities. One school district in East Texas, and then I know Jerry's trying to jump in here, but one school district alone will lose 25% of the acreage that supplies its, the taxes for this school district, will lose at least 100 homes, and all those families will be moving away. What's that going to do to the local community?
You know, it's interesting that you talked about Marvin Nichols and the groundwater export projects, Janice, because I think those are issues that the legislature is still grappling with. I think what we saw this session, there was certainly consensus with regard to funding, where you had majorities in the Texas House and the Texas Senate pass the sevens, HJR 7 and Senate Bill 7, creating this funding stream. But there were still bills introduced relating to Marvin Nichols, and I think that debate still rages. I've been working in legislature for over 25 years, and that debate hasn't changed since last century. And then even this summer in July, Chairman Cody Harris from Palestine convened a record-breaking in terms of length interim committee hearing talking about these proposed projects to export groundwater from East Texas to westward to
And you're
Dallas.
talking about about 40 mass capacity wells that are trying to get permission to drill here and export that to another part of the state.
Yeah, that was the subject of it. It was an incredibly long hearing, and if
11 hours.
that's incredibly long in the
Yeah.
interim.
Very long.
And so I think the legislature is still grappling with these issues. I don't think there's like there's not a clean-cut decision one way or the other. I think it's going to be continued to be discussed in the sessions to come.
Well, I certainly hope so, because we're talking something we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of people's lives being disrupted over something. And one of the things that is very troubling for East Texans is that the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex as a whole has a significantly higher, what we call GPCD, that is gallons per person per day of water use, than other cities here in Texas have accomplished. Many of the cities have gotten theirs down in the 120 to 130 gallons per person per day range, whereas the DFW is, I've been spending time in the Regency plant, and they use numbers like 165 and as much as 180, and not really projecting for it to go down a lot. So a lot of that is for water, is for lawn watering, and it's really hard on a person here who are maybe having to tell grandma that she can't be buried next to grandpa in the cemetery because that land's going to be underwater. And what the water is actually going to go is water somebody's lawn somewhere else. I mean, those kind of issues don't get put into the water plan, into the statistics.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I've got to weigh in. Couple
Yes,
things.
absolutely.
I've been in the water planning business since 1998, so 27 years in water planning on the East Texas Regional Water Planning Group, Region I, as it's known locally. We've got to throw everything at the board and see what sticks, because what makes sense here doesn't make sense in the West, it makes sense in the North and South. And the planning process has kind of morphed to the point that it's just a lot of data, and it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, look deep enough into what the local wants, needs, and desires are of each individual region. I don't know how you do that, even if there was a shift in mindset. But we've got to throw all these projects at the plan, because some of them just are not feasible. You're exactly correct; they're not. Our Lake Columbia project, for example, is it's a smaller lake, 10,133 acres. It's well received locally. The local folks want to see it built. They're looking at the economic development it's going to bring to the region, documented. It's data that's relatively old at this point, but it's documented. It's going to bring economic development to the region. I hear a lot of folks back home in my hometown of Lufkin talk about, we want, economic development here, and we want people to come here. Well, I understand that concept. However, we've got I-69 running through Lufkin, Texas. It's going to be there in the next decade. And we have got a crime problem. It is just unreal. I tell folks all the time, I don't want the Metroplex. I want their money. I want to be able to build a reservoir back home and use their money to fund it and be able to do what river authorities are supposed to do, develop water and recreation associated with that water and that infrastructure as a whole. Secondly, the River Authority has opposed, and we vehemently opposed, I personally oppose, the movement of large volumes of groundwater from East Texas. It's the wrong thing to do. I've been doing this for a long time, 35 years, driving around in trucks looking at water systems. And local folks, local water suppliers need a less expensive, more readily available source of water that is easier to treat than surface water. And groundwater is that source. One of the things that bothers me about that particular topic is that there's a lot of data out there, but the data can be skewed any way you want to skew the data. The reality is that nobody knows what's going to happen to the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer when you sink, those 40-odd wells and start drawing 50 million gallons a day out of the groundwater. It's going to cause problems. And once that is done, it's very difficult to undo that process. And the impact is going to be imminent on those water suppliers when that aquifer starts dropping the static water levels and they can't pump groundwater anymore.
Yeah, and you're talking about how much do we know about our aquifers and what available data is there. And from what I've learned throughout reporting is that not every aquifer has a lot of readily available data maybe that you can kind of project what those 40 wells could do.
You could project, but again, until you drill it and you start pumping
you won't
hard,
see the impacts, I
you
guess.
will not know the impact until it actually occurs. Then it's too late.
Yeah, and Jeremy, I'll go to you, Janice, in a bit. I just want to hear from Jeremy real quick, because, you were at the Capitol listening to these conversations unfold, particularly about this issue. What were your biggest takeaways there? In particular, I'm thinking about the bills that Cody Harris proposed, Representative Cody Harris.
Yes, so over in the special sessions, we had two of them starting late July, ending a couple months later, I forgot precisely when. But he introduced several bills that would have placed some limitations with regard to groundwater exports. And I think what they're really trying to deal with is when it comes to groundwater in Texas, there's essentially two types of groundwater legally. There's the groundwater that's within a groundwater conservation district. And these are districts that are formed by aquifer lines, county lines, political jurisdictions. And these are the legislature's preferred way of groundwater management. They regulate how much you can pump and where you can put your well. So that's one type of groundwater. The other type of groundwater is what we call groundwater in the gray area, where there's no groundwater conservation district. And there, it's largely governed by the rule of capture, where the biggest pump essentially can pump as much as it wants. And his legislation was largely focused at wells in these areas that are outside of a groundwater conservation district. They ultimately didn't pass, but I think, given the hearing that we had in July, the fact that the governor even included these items on the call for the special session, clearly indicates that this will be an issue that will be explored further going ahead.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that you could give us like the bigger picture. Like, yes, this bill came out of this particular situation, but it seems like, the groundwater is taking more and more center stage in water conversations. And so when you talk about like this particular bill dealing with groundwater exploitation, how state view, how does that look like?
I think that the legislature, so 20 years ago, I think the legislature always recognized, there's certainly a private property right to groundwater, and this common law rule called the rule of capture, basically works to protect that property right. But I think what we're seeing is there's a tension happening where, one, the legislature understands and respects the fact that groundwater is a property right, and this is certainly held up by the Texas Supreme Court, and the legislature's adopted laws to say as much. But they're recognizing that in the absence of regulation, reasonable regulation in the form of groundwater conservation districts, that property right that can be exercised by some can basically threaten the water availability of others. And so there's this tension that's been building for several years that I think is coming to head right now. And so I think that's going to be the crux of the debate. Will the legislature be okay with these gray areas that don't have groundwater conservation districts? Or will they prefer to see more local-based regulations? And I think the other thing the legislature would probably want to do as well is to invest in greater science and data when it comes to groundwater availability.
We definitely need it.
That's something that's lacking. I know there was there was some money set aside in the budget this session to do that, but I think that's also something that they could, looking forward, they certainly need to do when it comes to sound, smart groundwater management.
And Janice, I think you wanted to talk a little bit.
Well, Kelly made the point that we need to, as he said, throw everything into the plan, look at every possible option, and I completely agree with that. But unfortunately, we've got kind of a systemic problem here in Texas with the way that planning and permitting are handled. For example, if people are objecting to a specific reservoir being in a specific regional plan, the planners will say, oh, this will be fully vetted by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality when the permit is being assessed. And so we're going to put it in the plan now, but we'll be looking at all these things. We'll be looking at the environmental damage, the economic damage, the damage on people's lives. Is it needed? But unfortunately, when TCEQ starts doing a permit hearing, the primary thing, and I've just been through what's called a contested case hearing, which is like a trial to determine whether or not a permit would be granted to Lake Ringgold, proposed by Wichita Falls. And what the testimony in this hearing is that mostly what TCEQ looks at is this consistent with the water plan? So what you've got is the planners saying that TCEQ will vet it, and TCEQ saying, well, if it's in the water plan, then it must be vetted, and here's the permit. And in this case, an administrative law judge recommended denial of the permit on very strong grounds, but the TCEQ granted it anyway. So what we've got here is a broken process between our planning and our permitting.
I don't think we should throw everything against the wall when it comes to planning. I guess I'm going to have to disagree with you.
Jeremy, I can't believe you say that.
We're debating. Well, I mean, if
We certainly ought to be prioritizing the things that have the lowest impact, the lowest cost, and the simplest to do, and we're not.
no disagreement with there, Janice, but what I'm saying, if we're just putting all these projects in the state water plan, and this is what we're saying on paper, will save the state's bacon if we're hit by a repeat of the drought of record and we have continued economic growth. And some of these things that we're putting in this plan haven't happened in 50 years and aren't likely to happen in 30 years.
Amen.
And we're banking our state's future on these projects that may or may not ever happen. I think we need to really look at this planning process so we can identify what projects can be delivered when and on time and how much water will actually be delivered.
I agree, and I stand corrected. Not everything in the plan. What I said was we should look and see what needs to be done, but it's the prioritization that we've got to be more careful.
The planning process is morphed so much over the last 30 years almost that it's not what it used to be. And when I talk about throwing everything in a plan, it's through that planning process. You vet all these things and you go through that process to determine what's viable and what's not viable. And the planning groups are supposed to make decisions based on the local water suppliers and their sponsors as to what becomes viable, and then makes a prioritized project that then goes forward for potential funding. So the process, Senator Perry and others have tried to fix this, and I say tried to fix it. It's a complicated process to fix, number one. So going through that process is much easier said than done in reality. I think we would all agree on that.
Totally agree. And when you look at the law, the legislature has said when it comes to state water planning, it's supposed to do two things. The first is to provide for the organized development of water resources, and the second is to prepare the state for a drought of record. And so I think if a lot of the focus is on what do we need to do to prepare for the next drought of record, but what does it also mean to be prepared? To organize, to develop water resources in an organized, orderly manner.
Well, unfortunately, when they're doing the water plans, they don't prioritize drought contingency. They actually say, okay, this is how much water we're going to need even in a drought, and they want to build that much water supply so that, everything's fine during the drought, but then you've got a lot of water that's just sitting there doing nothing most of the time. And if instead they would focus on ways to do drought contingency planning so it's not so harmful, but you don't waste a lot of water the rest of it. When it's not a drought, that would help a lot.
Janice, how do you do that when you have a drought of record that's roughly every 40 to 50 years, and these projects, these large water supply projects, take decades to bring online and billions of dollars these days? It's not millions, it's billions. And I'm going to go back to Prop 4, a pitch for Prop 4. You can't do any of this unless you've got the money. And historically, again, I'm an old guy in the room, historically, we've not spent the amount of money on water infrastructure in all of its many forms to solve the problem. We're getting there, and thank God we are getting there. But if you don't have the cash, it doesn't matter what you've got in the water plan, you're not going to be able to do it.
So I have one question related to that, but before I turn to that, I encourage everyone, if you look at your program, there is a QR code. If you want to ask a question, you can submit it through there. We're going to go to that shortly after this question that I have about Prop 4 specifically is, I'm hearing this debate, I'm hearing about what water projects should be prioritized. As we look forward, to this November election, if Prop 4 passes and there is this huge bucket of money that is ready to go out the door, how can everyday residents, like people here in East Texas, ensure that that is being spent on projects that will benefit them? I'm talking about transparency and accountability when it comes to this money.
Can I jump on that one?
Sure. Go right ahead.
So Prop 4 is on the ballot, and it amends the Texas Constitution to create this $1 billion per year dedicated revenue stream to the Texas Water Fund. And as we said earlier, this can be used to pay for fixing aging, deteriorating systems, flood protection projects, as well as expanding our water supplies. And it would last for 20 years, and it doesn't increase taxes. It uses existing sales tax revenues. The legislature passed this other bill, Senate Bill 7, that includes multiple provisions that provide for greater transparency and oversight and accountability with the use of this dedicated revenue stream. So it's not unchecked money going to a state agency, the Water Development Board, without any accountability or oversight. In fact, the legislature has strengthened its oversight of the Water Development Board's use of these monies through two ways. The first is creating a special select committee to oversee the board's administration of the fund. And also the constitutional amendment itself says that these monies are subject to further appropriation by the legislature. which means that the legislature every session will have to give the final green light for these monies to go to the Texas Water Fund to be spent on water infrastructure. And then on top of that, Senate Bill 7 also includes these performance and accountability measures that track what taxpayers are getting in return for this strategic investment in water infrastructure. We talk about the need for more water supplies. We talk about the need for fixing failing or at-risk system. These performance measures will begin to describe the progress the state of Texas is making towards addressing these challenges. And so I think there's several things in place that really can provide some unique and exceptional oversight and accountability with regard to these dedicated funds.
And to follow up, all of these are public processes.
Yes.
All processes that anybody in this room, anybody listening can get involved in for free. All you do is have an internet connection, a computer, your iPhone to be able to log on and look at this stuff. So we all have an opportunity, lay person alike, to view, listen, and make public comment, all the way from the legislature all the way down to the administrative agencies that are doing this type work.
100%.
And I'm just going to take a moment to plug an awesome tool that we have in our website. If you want to get more involved in water planning, we have a tool where you put your address and it tells you exactly where your water comes from, how you can get involved, what water planning group you belong to, and who are the representatives and senators that you should be calling to tell them what are your pressing water needs or what you want to see in your region in particular. Did anyone else have anything to add regarding Prop 4 before we go to questions? Okay, great. Well, then I'll welcome Jess back to the stage, and thank you for submitting your questions.
Okay, so this first question, I believe I've translated it. I believe they're asking, Prop 4, is this grant money to all water systems, or is this a loan?
It remains to be determined. So the money, this dedicated money, will go to the Texas Water Fund. And that is basically like a huge holding fund, if you will, where the funds can be distributed to other funds that the legislature and voters have created. Some of these funds can provide low-interest loans or forgivable loans, which are like grants, or they can provide grants. It really depends on what the type of the project is, the income of the community, and the program fund being involved. So I guess the answer to that, Jess, is yes, it could be provided as grants or forgivable loans, but also low-interest loans as well. It depends.
Okay, great. Andy Hill from Longview asks, what efforts or measures are the areas most at risk doing to address the expected water supply shortage before looking elsewhere to supplement the supply?
Would you say that again?
Yeah, you're going to have to ask that question again, Jess.
Right into the mic this time.
Okay. What efforts or measures are the areas most at risk doing to address the expected water supply shortage before looking elsewhere to supplement the supply?
Too numerous to really list and label. I mean, it depends on what part of the state you're in as to what those risks are and the competing interests for water.
I mean, one example, like I was talking with a mayor in East Texas a couple weeks ago, and he had to replace a 120-year-old pipeline to their lake to make sure that they had reliable water supplies to their community, and even their trunk lines inside their city, those were 70 years old and leaking. And so I think, I mean, certainly in East Texas, it may be an issue of upgrading and fixing the leaks and making sure that your system no longer has problems that contribute to boil water notices. Elsewhere, such as if you go further west, like to San Antonio or El Paso, you're seeing some fascinating stories about water innovation going on, where they're looking at water reuse, brackish water desalination, amazing stories when it comes to water conservation innovation. It just really depends on the region.
Okay, great. Caleb from White Oak asks, what was the inciting incident for the water crisis in Texas?
Yeah, I'm having trouble, Jess.
Can you repeat that?
What was the inciting incident for the water crisis in Texas?
I How do you answer that one? It just came to a head. I'm not sure what particular issue brought it, but you've got the growth along the I-35 corridor and in that part of the world, especially south of San Antonio, between Austin, San Antonio, and south. That's one issue. And then you couple that with the 50 MGD water withdrawals from the Carrizo-Wilcox in the Natchez Trinity Valley Groundwater Conservation District. Those are two of the big topics that I think just caused all of this to blow up. And I'm glad personally because it's bringing audience to a topic that has been sorely, it's a discussion we should have had a long time ago.
Caleb, I would say
Conservationists have been talking about, water problems and the conflicts that I'm talking about for decades. I mean, I've been working on these issues for a long time, but they've been under the radar. And it's really exciting to see the legislature trying to come to grips with it. It's too big to do in one session, but the population has reached a point that we just can't keep doing water the way we've been doing water, or we're not going to be able to maintain we're going to cover up too much land, we're going to do too much environmental harm, we're going to do too much economic damage as a side.
Harold Hunter from Houston asks, Jeremy and Kelly, how do we also address the aging operators along with the aging infrastructure?
That's a great question.
Yeah. You want that one, Jeremy? Go for it. Okay. Well, the last data I saw that was hard data was that by the year 2027, close of 2027, 70% of the water, wastewater operators were going to age out of the system. I think that's still relatively good data. It's probably skewed some by this point. I know the legislature, in conjunction with TCEQ, has implemented multiple solutions trying to solve this problem. But at the end of the day, there's only one answer to the problem. When I'm paying an operator, a water operator, $50 an hour to walk in the door that knows nothing about the water business, I could attract all kinds of folks. What does that mean? It means that y'all's water bill is going up. There's no way around it, and I know nobody wants to hear it. You're not going to fix these problems with 1960s, 1970s, and 80s water rates. You're just not.
Okay, Cher Parr from Marion County asks, or did you want to answer that, Jeremy? I'm sorry.
no, Kelly nailed it.
Okay. Cher Parr from Marion County asks, why are we running headfirst into an exponential crisis of water shortages and not toning down the explosive development growth?
Do you want to take that?
So the way I hear the question, why are we building water for explosive growth, and why are we not asking what we can do to not have
Curtail the
explosive
growth.
It's I'll just say this. My impression of state leadership in this legislature is that they see this thing called the Texas economic miracle, where it has expansion in manufacturing, semiconductors, space, energy. All these sectors are expanding here. And we're seeing state GDP increase at a rate of 230% over the past quarter of a century. There's more jobs in Texas. We have great job growth. We have growing communities. The strategic importance of the state to not only the nation, but the world, especially when it comes to energy and defense manufacturing and semiconductors, is unrivaled. And this legislature and the governor see that, and they respect it, and they want to promote it. And so the honest answer to that question is, I don't think this legislature is interested in stopping this economic miracle. There are a lot of good things that are happening from it. True, it comes with challenges. We need to expand our water supply portfolio. We need to fix these failing systems so they can reliably deliver water to manufacturers and business and families. But I think that's a big reason why the legislature made water such a big issue in 2025.
Janice?
I think sometimes people go after some of these industries thinking it's going to cause a lot more jobs for the local people. And it doesn't always work out that way. We're seeing cities, let's get a data center here. And then they realize, well, we don't really have enough water for this. So now we got to go get another reservoir. And yes, maybe it'll bring a few more people into the region, with jobs, but it's also costing more too. And the same thing with anything, like if it takes out a lot of your land base, it takes your water, the economic development, sometimes it's just really not as good for particularly smaller communities as it sounds like it's going to be.
Jess, I've got a slightly different view. Because we're a retail water provider, I see things differently. I see things in dollars and cents in terms of water rates and impact to customers. And while I don't disagree with what Janice just said, there's another side of this story, and that is if we don't have new people coming into the system paying for this infrastructure that's in some cases 60 and 70 years old at this point in the game, a vast majority of it is 60 and 70 years old, we all get to pay for it. So what does that do to my water bill at home with my water supply corporation, and how does that impact me? And I think what you hear from us is it's all about balance. And there's so many competing interests for water and for money and space and land and environmental impacts. I go back to my comment about throw everything at the wall, see what sticks. Just because you put a project and put it forward in a regional water planning process doesn't mean it should make it all the way through that planning process. However, we need to look at it. We need to evaluate it. And I know there's some legislators in the room tonight. Y'all have done a phenomenal job, an amazing job. Keep it up. This conversation is just getting started. It's just now heating up, in my opinion, with details and a whole lot of other folks in the world that are smarter than me and us sitting here tonight talking to y'all.
Okay, now this question is smarter than I am, so bear with me. Will impact monitoring studies extend to a wider spatial and time scope than usual? And will interactions with multiple connected aquifer levels and surface level water levels be monitored as well?
I presume we're talking groundwater with that.
Assuming.
The answer is probably not anytime soon, and there has to be a significant expansion of infrastructure to be able to monitor what's happening below the ground, especially if we're talking statewide and aquifers that span the entire state.
And you need to invest in state and groundwater conservation district data collection for this to happen. And as I said, the legislature did appropriate some money for this to happen, but some of these groundwater conservation districts, some are incredibly sophisticated, like the Edwards Aquifer Authority. Others just don't have a big staff and don't really have the funds to hire a hydrologist to do that kind of analysis. And so if we want that data and we need that data, there need to be investments in order to get it.
Definitely.
Okay, during this second special session, why did the Senate effectively gut Representative Harris's House bill that would have imposed a moratorium on groundwater export permits for the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer until a further study of that aquifer was performed? It seems that until we know how much water is available in that aquifer and how soon it is regenerated, no applications for large-scale, high-volume water wells should be granted.
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
I don't either.
Okay.
I suppose we would have to ask a legislator that, and I'm definitely not in a position to do that.
I think there's a few of them here.
You can catch them after.
Yeah. Can we offset this crisis by rainwater collection at each home? Can we use some of the rainwater to send to water purification stations in the city, much like solar panels do to our electric grid? This could provide enough water for everyone, even some of those who do not have rainwater collection, and make a little money on the side.
Rainwater harvesting is great for certain applications, particularly someone who's isolated and so forth. But from an economic point of view, it's better to do it the municipality. Basically, reuse the water that you've already got in your municipality, and reuse and recycling is more economically efficient if you do it on a citywide or utility-wide scale than house by house.
We can talk about approving a reservoir or water plan in Texas all we want, but even if we get through all of the state approvals, the federal agencies that have the final approvals and have for decades have been stonewalling these projects. How do we influence these approvals?
What was the what was the actual question? Just-
How do we influence these approvals?
We get to vote every 2 and every 4 years. That's the only solution to the problem. In my opinion, that cuts across every topic you want to talk about with regard to regulatory action. There's only one way to solve that.
However, the regulatory action often isn't really done by the legislature or by anyone who you vote for. It's done by the TCEQ who are appointed. And one of the complaints that a lot of people who have gone through permitting processes is that, the system is, as I was talking about earlier, it's skewed toward granting permits without sufficient vetting. So there needs to be focus on TCQ.
And I think that's all the time we have for questions today. But before we wrap it up, just quickly, rapid round, any closing remarks that any of you have? And yeah, I'll start with you, Janice.
Well, as I say, I think it's absolutely wonderful that the legislature is focusing on innovative technologies, because there is so much we can do to reduce the demand on the demand side. And everything we reduce on the demand side saves us a huge amount of money and impact on the supply side. So let's keep encouraging that.
There's a lot of gray hair up here, and there's one no hair, but we won't talk about that, Jeremy. My comments are geared toward the younger generation. Y'all are the ones that we are building for. I'm going to retire out in the next 5 to 7 years. Janice, I don't know about you, but we've been doing this a while. There's not enough young, talented individuals, male, female, it does not matter, that are coming up in the business to pick up where we have left off. We've worked for decades to get this conversation started, and we're finally here having this conversation in forums like this all across the state of Texas. It's got to continue, but it won't continue with me. It just won't. I'll be the recipient of the work that's done after I retire out of the system. So if you want a career, the water industry is the career for you. I promise you, over the last 35 years, it has grown exponentially, and it is an up-and-coming career for young adults.
And the conservation side of it, too.
Well, I think, first of all, when I started working on water policy 20 years ago, I had a beautiful head of hair. Look at me now. I know water is oftentimes a dry subject, but you're hearing the energy of the room, clearly not. Had to throw a dad joke in there. So, but I think, I think my closing shot is this. The legislature is recognizing what the importance of reliable water infrastructure is to all Texas communities. And that's why they're submitting Proposition 4 to the choice of the voters. Do you want the legislature and the state to have a bigger role in providing funding we need for our water infrastructure needs? And so that's what the question is on November 4th. But I'll say, this may be the easy choice. I think there's still some harder conversations ahead of us with regard to groundwater use and state water planning. It's going to get a lot more exciting in the years to come.
I wanted to thank everyone for coming, and I wanted to thank our panelists, Janice, Kelly, and Jeremy, for being here. Thank you so much. If you want to learn more about water issues across the state, we have this amazing series called Running Out at thetexastribune.com. And thank you so much for having us today.